Welcome back to By the Pages, where we open a book and pull out the most interesting parts. Today, we're looking at Breath, the New Science of a Lost Art, by James Nestor.
Oh, I've heard great things about that one.
James takes us through history and science, using his own experiences to show how breathing affects our health.
It's amazing how something so basic is often overlooked.
Right. It's like we forget we're even doing it half the time.
Exactly. And James really highlights how breathing impacts everything: sleep, energy, even our mental state.
One of the things that really jumped out at me is that humans are the worst breathers in the animal kingdom.
It's true. And kind of shocking when you think about it.
It seems counterintuitive.
It is. James explains how changes over time, plus the modern diet, have led to this.
Like smaller mouths and those processed foods we all love.
Yeah, things like that. They've caused lots of breathing problems for people.
James even tried breathing only through his mouth for 10 days to see what would happen.
Oh, I remember reading about that. What a crazy experiment.
Can you imagine?
Not really.
His sleep got worse, blood pressure went up, even his athletic performance tanked.
All from just breathing through his mouth.
It really emphasizes how important the nose is for breathing.
More than just smelling, right?
Right, so much more. The nose filters and prepares the air for our lungs.
It's like a whole system we bypass when we breathe through our mouths.
Makes sense, but I've always thought slower breathing would make you feel more out of breath, especially when working out.
It does seem that way, doesn't it? But there's this doctor, Konstantin Buteyko, who actually created a breathing technique that's about reducing how much air you take in.
Sounds strange, but I'm intrigued.
It is, but it works by improving your carbon dioxide levels.
So less air means better use of oxygen.
You got it. James tried this Buteyko method himself and saw real improvements in his health and how long he could exert himself.
That's impressive. It makes you wonder if just changing your breathing could help with things like asthma.
That's what James found. He really dives deep into how powerful breathing can be.
I'm starting to understand how breathing connects to so many parts of our health.
It really does, and it goes even further. James also explored how breathing affects our autonomic nervous system, the one that controls things like our heart rate and digestion.
Okay, but how does breathing connect to stress, for example?
James looked at practices like tumo meditation and holotropic breathwork.
I've heard of those, but they seem pretty intense.
They are, but they use very specific ways of breathing. What James found was that these techniques actually changed how he felt, both physically and mentally, even affecting how he perceived fear.
Wow, that's powerful. It sounds like these methods could be risky, though.
James acknowledges that. They're not for everyone, and he really stresses doing them carefully with the right guidance.
So maybe the stress we feel every day could be partly because of how we breathe.
It's definitely a possibility. James talks about how modern life and poor breathing habits are linked to all sorts of stress-related problems.
That's making me think more carefully about how I breathe.
Me too. And there's another connection James makes between our modern lives and breathing, and that's our food.
You mean what we eat affects how we breathe?
It does. James explains how the shift from harder foods to the soft, processed foods we eat now has messed with our jaw development and made our airways narrower.
So chewing on a carrot is good exercise for my face.
Basically, yes. James researched this by looking at the work of a Dr. Weston Price.
What did Dr. Price find?
He studied indigenous cultures and saw that people who ate harder foods had wider jaws and better airways.
That makes sense. I never considered how it affects things like sleep or stress before reading this.
James covers all that. One of the most interesting parts for me was about nasal breathing.
We touched on that, but why does James focus so much on breathing through the nose?
He shows all the bad things that happen when you breathe through your mouth. He even did another experiment where he forced himself to mouth breathe for 10 days.
Oh, that sounds awful.
It was. He started snoring more, had sleep apnea, and couldn't perform as well athletically.
That's convincing.
Right. James explains the nose does way more than just let air in. It filters and conditions the air so our bodies can use it better.
So when my nose is stuffed up, it's a bigger deal than I thought.
Exactly. James says we need to pay attention to anything blocking our noses and try to fix it.
So how do we make sure we're breathing through our noses the right way? Is there a special technique?
James talks about the diaphragm and how it works. He says we should do diaphragmatic breathing or belly breathing to breathe better.
I've heard of that, but I'm not sure I'm doing it right.
It's where you use your diaphragm, that muscle separating your chest and belly, to pull air deep into your lungs. James says lots of people only breathe from their chest.
I think I do that especially when I'm stressed. My breaths get all short and fast.
That happens, but it can make you more stressed. James says if we retrain ourselves to use our diaphragms, we can get more oxygen, improve blood flow, and feel calmer.
So how do we switch from chest breathing to belly breathing?
James has exercises for making your diaphragm stronger. He even uses examples from singers and musicians who have to control their breathing really well.
Those singers make it look so easy.
It takes practice.
Hmm.
James also emphasizes not just breathing in deep, but also letting all the air out when you exhale.
I always focus on the inhale. I forget about the exhale.
Lots of people do. James says exhaling fully is important for balancing carbon dioxide, relaxing your nervous system, and even cleaning your lungs.
I thought carbon dioxide was bad, like something we need to get rid of.
That's a myth, actually. James spends a lot of time explaining what carbon dioxide really does in the body.
Okay, tell me more about that.
James says carbon dioxide is not just waste. It helps control blood flow, deliver oxygen, and even affects how we feel mentally. He says more oxygen isn't always better, and breathing too much can actually reduce oxygen to our cells.
Wow, I never knew that.
It's counterintuitive. James talks about that doctor, Buteyko, again, and how his breathing technique focuses on less air intake to balance carbon dioxide.
So by slowing down our breathing and having more carbon dioxide, we use oxygen better.
That's it. James tried it and felt a big improvement in his own breathing.
It seems like there's so much we don't understand about breathing.
James's book really makes you think differently. He doesn't shy away from less common ideas either. He even looks at extreme breathing techniques like tumo meditation and holotropic breathwork.
Those sound intense. What did James find out about them?
He actually tried these techniques and interviewed people who use them. He describes feeling different states of consciousness and exploring his emotions in new ways.
It sounds like he was going beyond just breathing to improve your health.
He was. James says these techniques aren't for everyone, but they can impact us physically, mentally, and emotionally. He stresses being careful and finding the right guidance.
I've noticed when I'm anxious, I breathe really fast. Is there a connection between breathing and fear?
There is, and James talks about it in detail. He explains how the amygdala, the part of our brain that deals with fear, affects our breathing. Breathing too fast can even mimic a panic attack, even when there's nothing to be afraid of.
So our breathing can actually make us more anxious.
It can, but James suggests that learning to control our breathing can help us control our fear and anxiety too.
That's good to know. It sounds like James sees breathing as a way to manage our emotions.
That's a big part of the book. He doesn't just explain the science, he gives people ways to use this knowledge. He also looks at how the way we breathe is connected to how the human face evolved, especially how our diets changed things.
Earlier, we talked about how eating softer foods led to weaker jaws and smaller airways. What else did James find about this?
He compared skulls and jaws from ancient humans to modern ones. He shows how switching to soft, processed foods really changed our faces and made it harder to breathe.
It makes you think about how food choices affect our health in ways we don't expect.
James definitely makes that point. He brings up Dr. Price's research again.
Refresh my memory, what did he find?
Dr. Price saw that people who ate harder foods had stronger jaws, wider mouths, and less trouble breathing. The indigenous cultures he studied had way fewer breathing problems than people eating modern diets.
So maybe we should eat more hard, natural foods.
That's what James thinks. He says chewing these foods makes our jaw muscles stronger and helps our faces develop properly, which ultimately leads to better breathing.
But what about those of us who already have trouble breathing? Is there anything we can do?
James says we're not stuck. He talks about techniques for expanding the mouth and making airways healthier. He even tried a dental device called the Homeo Block.
So there's hope for adults who struggle with breathing.
Definitely. James says it takes effort, but even adults can change and breathe better. He believes we can overcome our genetics and habits to breathe more naturally.
That's encouraging.
James tells stories of people who transformed their lives by changing how they breathe. He talks about people overcoming asthma, sleeping better, improving their athletic abilities, and even lowering their anxiety just through breathing exercises.
It's amazing how something so simple can have such a big impact.
That's James's point. He wants us to see breathing not just as a bodily function, but as a way to heal ourselves and grow.
It's fascinating how something we do without thinking can be so powerful.
Exactly. James reminds us that we have this power inside us. Breathing is a resource we always have, and if we learn to use it consciously, we can improve our lives in so many ways.
What tips does James give for using breathwork in everyday life?
He says start with simple things like diaphragmatic breathing, longer exhales, and even trying to breathe through your nose while exercising. He says to be consistent, Even a few minutes a day can make a difference.
I like that he gives practical advice that's easy to do.
Me too. He also points out that there's no one right way to do breath work. He encourages us to try different things and see what works for our own bodies.
That's important. Everyone is different.
Exactly. James wants us to become experts on our own breathing and discover what feels best for us. It's crazy how we try to fix problems using all these external things when maybe the answer is just changing how we breathe.
James's book really emphasizes that. He's not saying breathing is a magical cure, but that it's a basic tool for improving our health.
It's something we do without thinking, thousands of times a day, but when we pay attention to it, we can really change how we feel.
I'm amazed by how many things James connects to breathing. It affects everything from exercise to sleep to anxiety.
It shows how connected our bodies are, and James does a great job of explaining that with science, history, and even his own experiences.
I like that he actually tried the breathing techniques himself.
Me too. It makes it more believable when you see someone actually doing it.
In the last part of the book, James talks about how breath work can change us on a really deep level. What did you think about that?
It's inspiring. He's saying breathing isn't just for physical health. It can help us understand ourselves better, control our emotions, and even grow spiritually.
So it's like our breath connects our body and mind.
Exactly. James tells stories about people using breath work to overcome trauma, find their inner selves, and have these really intense experiences.
It's hard to believe something as simple as breathing can do all that.
It is, but James explains it in a way that makes sense. He doesn't make it sound magical, just a natural human ability we can all learn.
This whole conversation has been eye-opening. I'm definitely going to pay more attention to my breathing now.
Me too.
Hmm.
What stood out to you the most from James's journey?
For me, it was realizing that we have so much power to control our own well-being. Breathing is always there, and by being conscious of it, we can make positive changes.
That's a great point. James's book is really a call to action, to pay attention to our breath and explore what it can do.
It's a reminder to slow down, connect with our bodies, and appreciate something we usually take for granted.
If you're interested in learning more, I highly recommend checking out James's book, Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art. You can find the link in the description.
And don't forget to like and subscribe to By the Pages for more deep dives into fascinating books. Thanks for listening.